Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Big Mike Sports. We are Atlanta born, Carolina raised, Detroit driven. I'm Big Mike, and you're not. And this was a huge win for the Lions on Sunday and a 20-6 victory over the Atlanta Falcons, a team that was really hot going into the game, being 2-0, undefeated. Not a team that people expected to have this big of a start, but they did win those two games at home in pretty close fashion. The Lions coming off of that home loss against the Seahawks in really heartbreaking fashion for them, going down 37-31 in overtime to the Seahawks. But this game was the kind of game that you needed to turn around the season and really, put a stamp on it, really make a mark on what kind of season you want it to be instead of wallowing in the defeat from last week. And the Lions went out and did that, setting the tone early on defense, holding the very, very vaunted Falcons rushing attack to only 48 yards or 44 yards, 33 of those from Bijan. Bijan came in on a tear and he was completely bottled up from the start of the game, not really able to get anything going. And that's what put it into Desmond Ridder's hands, and he did what he could, going 21 to 38 for 201 yards. And that's exactly the kind of thing that we thought that they needed to do. They needed to be able to shut down the rushing attack and put it into Ridder's hands, and it would become a battle between the team's quarterbacks. And with the Lions having the better quarterback, they came out on top in that one. Ridder not really able to get a whole lot going. There were a few open passes that he was able to get a little bit down the field, but most of his stuff came pretty short. The leading receivers for the Falcons being the tight ends, Kyle Pitts and Jonnu Smith. Both guys under 10 yards per catch. Drake London had a couple of catches, but not really much of a factor in this one. And the Lions offense, on the other hand, was able to take control with Gibbs really coming into his own on the ground game after Montgomery had to sit out this game with the thigh injury. And Goff was also pretty good in this game. Nothing spectacular. He did throw the one interception to Jesse Bates, who has 3 interceptions already this year. He's a guy that we were scared of on the defense, and as soon as he got that pick, I said, yep, there's one for Bates. That was the guy that we wanted to look out for. But overall, the Falcons defense wasn't really able to handle the Lions. The Lions were able to move the ball pretty effectively for most of the game. Of course, there were a couple times that they did have to punt in some key situations, and then the interception was pretty tough as well. But Jack Fox, being the great punter that he is, was able to pin the Falcons deep, and their offense was not really able to do a whole lot, which gave the Lions some pretty good field position at certain points in the game. Speaking of the Lions on offense, it was huge games from Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. It's the kind of game that you kind of expect from Amon-Ra at this point, being the number one receiver for the Lions and knowing what he's capable of. But Laporta coming out and breaking NFL tight end records for catches and yards to start a career. In this one, he had 8 catches, 84 yards, and a touchdown on a 45-yard play that he was just wide open on that play. It was like a corner route, and there's just nobody around him. It was one of those plays that you just love to see from the young tight end. So he's really coming into his own. He might end up being one of the best tight ends in the entire league by the end of the season. And Khalif Raymond also added a little bit, going for 4 catches, 55 yards. Jahmyr Gibbs, not really a whole lot going for him. Goff was looking a little bit more down the field, so he didn't really check it down to Gibbs, and there weren't a whole lot of passes to Gibbs in like the screen game or anything. But that's because Gibbs was kind of keeping it on the ground. He had probably his breakout rushing game. I mean, he had enough carries, certainly. This is the most carries he's had in any game throughout his short career. But 17 carries for 80 yards. 36 of those, I think, came on the final drive for the Lions when it was really a backbreaker for the Falcons with the forced fumble by Hutchinson, and then Gibbs just got free on a couple long runs. So really encouraging to see Gibbs really kind of break out there. Of course, we're still waiting on a really big play for Gibbs to break. There was one play, I think it was the first game of the year, where Gibbs had a chance at a long reception, but he ended up dropping it. But plays like that will end up coming. He's going to end up busting a really huge run or catch one of these games. And yeah, we're all going to be really excited once that happens.
Nice shot!
And it was a very, very encouraging defensive performance from the Lions. Really important to be able to bounce back from that performance against the Seahawks. Not that the defense was that awful against the Seahawks. I mean, they did get a couple of stops in that Seahawks game in key moments, especially at the end of the game when they really needed a stop to potentially go on a game-winning drive on offense. And the Falcons' offense isn't the greatest, but the weapons are there, especially with the running game. They're really, really powerful running game there in Atlanta with Bijan and even Algier. Algier was even more of a non-factor than Robinson. Neither of them were really able to get anything going on the ground. So yeah, the Lions being able to shut down that kind of offense really encouraging. The rush defense hasn't really been as much of an issue the rest of the season. They've been able to put a cap on other teams' rushing attacks. It was mainly the passing defense that was kind of a problem. But in this one, of course, Ritter's not the greatest quarterback, not really one to push the ball down the field, but the safeties for the Lions really came out big in defending that passing game. A lot of times when there was an open guy making a catch in the middle, the safeties were able to make a big play and pop the ball out. And it's even more encouraging because a lot of those guys in the safeties were backups. Of course, we had Tracy Walker, who was a starter for a long time, but now more of a depth role. He came in and really made the most of his opportunity. This was a game that he was really looking forward to, and he came out big on defense. And then even Melifonwu, Ify Melifonwu, was able to make his presence known. Now, this is a guy who I've been a big detractor on. In the moments that he has been able to get into the game, it hasn't looked very good. I'm thinking mainly of the Panthers game where the whole defense didn't really play very well, but if he did get the start in that game because Deshaun Elliott had to go down, and it did not look good from him. So maybe I was wrong to hold that against him. He looked really good in this game, but time will tell if he'll be able to keep it up. But then also, Brian Branch had kind of a big coming out game as well. 11 tackles, 3 for loss, and 2 passes defense. He was all over the field, and at one point in the game, he had a big hit on Bijan Robinson that really amped up the wow factor to 10. Bijan's helmet came flying off and everything. It was really crazy. He, of course, got flagged for it, but you love that kind of juice from the young guy who's trying to become a big cornerstone of the defense, especially when the other big emotional leader of the team, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, had to be out for this one, being on the IR after that pec injury against the Seahawks. So the rest of the Lions rookies, even Jack Campbell got in there with 6 tackles and a sack. Really good to see him come into his own as well. The whole rookie class for the Lions really played well in this game. Of course, we talked to Laporta, Branch, and Campbell, but even fifth round interior offensive lineman Colby Sorsdahl from William and Mary, he had to come in and play right tackle after Nelson and Skipper both went down with injuries in the game. And he did a pretty serviceable job having to play out of position like that. Of course, they had to help him out a lot, and it didn't look perfect. Like, there were definitely a couple times where he gave up a couple of pressures on Goff, but Goff was able to get the ball out quickly, and Sorsdahl, he could have been awful playing out of position like that, but I think he did a pretty serviceable job. So very, very good look from the rookies there. Really exciting stuff. And I was really nervous about Gibbs versus Bijan because you know that people were going to be talking about that a lot if Bijan just ran wild on this defense and Gibbs did nothing. But Gibbs handily won this first showdown between them. Of course, these are two guys whose careers are going to be very tied and woven together, with one being picked over the other, and pretty close up on top of the draft board. So really reassuring to see Gibbs come into his own, the Lions being able to shut down Bijan like that. And like I said, the win gets the season back on track, especially going into a huge game on Thursday night at Lambeau Field for control of first place in the division. Uh, Really excited to see the Lions go back into Lambeau after what they were able to do last year. Of course, a new look team for the Packers with Jordan Love tearing it up, throwing a lot of touchdown passes, and somehow being able to come back from behind against the Saints. I thought that the Packers were toast in that Saints game, but they came back at the very end, being able to win at the buzzer, and that's what makes this matchup even more intriguing, I think, is the fact that the Packers have shown that they can be a very dangerous team in close games like that, especially at the end. So the Lions have to be really careful about closing out that team. A really exciting game, a lot to play for. Both team seasons really riding on that game on Thursday night, so it was really good for the Lions to be able to get this win on Sunday and take that momentum going into that game. Both teams are going to have momentum, honestly, so it's going to be a battle of the wills on Thursday night as it starts to get cold up there in Green Bay. Now, not everything was perfect in this game. Obviously, nothing ever is. The offense had some sputters at certain points in the game, but that is a very tough Atlanta defense. They're one of those teams that's going to try and grind you out just as the Lions sometimes are wont to do. So, really impressive in that regards for the offense being able to persevere like that. And then on defense, Jerry Jacobs is still a bit of an issue. I mean, he didn't play as awfully in this game as he did against the Seahawks, but he still got a couple of defensive pass interference penalties that hurts the team. And, penalties were kind of an issue for the entire game for the Lions, especially on the offensive line. There were a lot of holding penalties. I'm not sure what the issue was, if it was just a group that wasn't necessarily used to playing together because, there were a lot of substitutes that had to go out there on the O line, but really weird calls against guys like Sewell and Ragnow, who are, some of the best at their position, getting called for those holding penalties. So maybe just a little off day. That is a tough defensive front again for the Falcons. You got big guys like Calais Campbell out there, pretty tough to block, and even Grady Jarrett. Grady Jarrett went on a pretty big tear on one of the Lions' drives, especially, and was able to really disturb the offensive line and get some made it very difficult for the Lions' offense there. So it was a very tough ask for some reserve O linemen to get in there and block those guys, but they were able to make the most of it and grind out the win there. And there were a few bad throws from Goff. He was a little off on a few, especially some of the deep passes. There were a couple that were just a little bit off, not exactly there, but overall, not a terrible performance. Yeah! And then the defensive line for the Lions also played very well. It took them a little while to get going, but the pressure was there on Ritter the whole game. And then at the end of the game, the floodgates completely broke for the Falcons' offensive line. The Lions really dominated the fourth quarter on the line of scrimmage there on defense. Ritter ended up getting sacked 7 times, 2 of those from Hutchinson, and a forced fumble at the end to seal it from Hutchinson as well. Hutchinson proving further that he is one of the elite defensive ends in the league. So overall, very good performance from the Lions, the exact kind of win that they needed going forward, and Aaron Glenn is able to keep his job and keep the haters at bay one more time. It's weird how after every loss, the blame seems to go on Glenn, and then after every win where the defense looks good, everybody's singing his praises and thinks that he's great. We'll see how mercurial the fan base will be moving forward down the line, but this is a very important Packers game on Thursday night going into Lambeau, as I said. So we're really looking forward to that one. That will be the true test. Like this previous game was the one that really gives you a nice kind of test to see where the Lions team is. This upcoming game with it's not late enough to this in the season to exactly say championship implications, but it is for first place and control of the division moving forward down the season. So not the end of the world if they lose this game, but it's one that you really want to win because then you'll start 3-1, have sole possession of first place, and it'll just get a lot easier from there. So maybe a low-scoring game depending on how the weather's going to be. I'm not exactly sure what the total will be, but hopefully the Lions will be able to grind one out and a potentially low-scoring game. So the defense is really going to be important. And plus, Jordan Love's been looking really good, throwing a bunch of passing touchdowns, so that'll be a huge test for the Lions' pass defense, which has had some issues in a couple of games this year. So big test to see if they really have what it takes to be championship playoff material against the ascendant Jordan Love and your division rival.
Check the statistics.
Now, around the rest of the league on Sunday, it was a pretty wacky day to say the least, with the Dolphins going up 70-20 on the Broncos. The Miami Dolphins are just light years ahead of anybody when it comes to offense, at least. I mean, the defense is pretty good as well, but I think that Miami definitely firmly planted themselves as the number 1 team in the entire NFL. It seems like the Dolphins, the 49ers, and everybody else at this point. Although the Bills are kind of sneakily up there as well. They have a plus 56 point differential against Miami's plus 59. The Bills have only allowed 35 points the entire season, which is pretty impressive. Josh Allen has had some issues with the turnovers, as has been widely reported at the beginning of this year, but Buffalo, another scary team up there in the AFC East. And then the AFC South is going to pan out to be very interesting to say the least, as the Colts were able to move up to 2-1 on the year after that overtime victory against the Ravens, putting themselves into first place. They are currently undefeated on the road at 2-0, and the Texans looked really good against the Jaguars in a resounding victory to move them up to 1-2. The rest of the division is at 1-2 right now. Maybe the Jaguars will be able to make a little late season run like they did last year after kind of a slow start. But yeah, very interesting to see how that division will pan out with, I mean, in theory, all four teams are alive right now. So who knows how that one's going to go. And then some of the teams that started 0-3, the Broncos starting 0-3 within that first year under Sean Payton. Who knows what's going to go with them as they have to play, that division, which is a really, really tough division. Some other 0-3 teams. The Bears, worst team in the league by far. They got destroyed by the Chiefs. Did not look good. They've given up 106 points all year. The Broncos just lost by 50, and they haven't even given up that many points. Oh, no, just kidding. They have. But the Bears are pretty close to a team that had lost by 50 points. So, of course, the Broncos' point differential before that loss was only -3. But anyway, also the Vikings starting their season 0-3, one that we did not really see coming. It's just been very unfortunate, but also kind of it is a very wild and sudden regression to the mean, but one that was bound to happen nonetheless after last season with their record in one-score games. Now they haven't won a single one, and who knows when they will. It's just been a bad luck year for Minnesota. I think it's just too much pressure on Kirk Cousins. They've been having to throw with him like 50 times a game, and he gets pretty close, but he just can't pull it out. Yeah, who knows what's going on with Minnesota. We'll see whether they'll be able to put it back together. They definitely need to start soon because the bottom of that division is not where you want to be, especially with Green Bay and Detroit potentially coming into their own as the season moves on. And then the Panthers starting 0-3. Bryce Young, I don't know. He looked all right, nothing crazy, but then, of course, he injures his ankle, and they have to throw Andy Dalton in there. And throwing with Andy Dalton 60 times in a game, or however many times he threw it, it was over 50, I'm pretty sure. That's not a recipe for success. Not looking good for Frank Reich and the Panthers, especially with the rest of the division really overachieving compared to the Panthers, rampant underachieving. Falcons and Saints 2-1, Tampa Bay 2-0. We'll see how they fare tonight in their game to see if they can keep their season undefeated or not. So yeah, really not where you want to be, especially in that division. We thought everybody was going to be pretty mediocre, but instead it's just the Panthers being bad, like awful, and everybody else doing all right, doing what they can. The Panthers' point differential, not the worst in the world, but yeah, definitely not where you want to be. Their point differential is better than the Commanders, who are currently 2-1, so it's really just a matter of luck, I guess, at that point in deciding some of your games. But yeah, definitely not the kind of start I saw the Panthers getting to.
That's terrible.
And then one more team trying not to start 0-3, and that is the Cincinnati Bengals as they go up against the Rams tonight. That'll be an exciting game to watch in a little Super Bowl rematch, and the Bengals trying to stave off 0-3. Who would have saw that coming? The Bengals have looked just awful this year. I don't know what their deal is. Their offense not clicking, Burrow going down and everything. So we'll see how that goes. We're looking forward to the Monday night games tonight, and we will catch up with you guys a little later.